Good morning. My name is Joel Cosberg. I am the assistant pastor at Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Downers Grove, Illinois. This week in your God With Us studies, you read page 61, the story of Jesus raising Jairus' daughter from the dead. I want you to imagine this story with me. Jesus comes with Jairus to this house where they're having this wake, this funeral, and there's crying and singing and wailing and beating of your chest, and it's a terrible, awful, loud scene. You can almost sense how gut-wrenching it must have been for Jairus to walk into that house. You sense how gut-wrenching it is for Jesus to walk into that house. But they walk through and they go up to this top room where Jairus' daughter is laying. As they step into that room and close the door, all of the noise and sadness and mourning outside is muffled by silence in the thickness of death in that room. And Jesus walks over across the room to where this little girl is laying, and he sees her lying in bed. We do this thing at Emmanuel. Every service we have our people kneel at kneelers in our sanctuary for confession and absolution. And in our 10 o'clock service, we have a singing part for the congregation to sing together a prayer of confession. And on weeks when I'm not preaching, I get to sit with my kids during this time. And I have two little girls, and I have a boy too, but the two little girls I sort of gather up around me on these kneelers. I kneel and they stand, and I sort of wrap my arms around them. And we sing together about God's mercy, and we sing together about God's forgiveness. And then the pastor stands up at this point after we've sung, and he walks out, and I whisper into my girl's ear, and I say, all right, listen up now. Listen for what he's going to say. And I lean over to the other one. I say, listen for what he's going to say. And the pastor walks up in front of the congregation, and he says something a little bit like what Jesus said to Jairus' daughter. I imagine the pastor opening his mouth and saying to me and saying to my little girls, little girl, I say to you, get up. Little girl, I say to you, you are forgiven. Little girl, I say to you, the life of Jesus that has been won for you through the cross and the empty tomb are yours. So as you think through this week, I have a couple of reflections that I think are worth thinking about while you walk the dog or gather in your groups or in your commute to and from work. The first question I think to reflect on is if God's grace is what raised this little girl from the dead, if it is exclusively by his grace in Jesus that this girl was brought back to life, then in what ways and in which places is that same grace delivered to you? In what ways and in which places is that same grace delivered to you? And I also want you to think about how you, as a follower of Jesus, can begin to tell the story of God's grace to those other people in your life who are in need of hope. How can we, as God's people, become fluent in telling the story of God's grace, of the hope and forgiveness and life that we have in Jesus? I'm praying for blessings on your time gathered together as a group, and I'm praying that the grace of God would come and settle itself down into your heart and mine, the hearts of your community and mine, and spread itself out in ways that shape us to be people of grace who live lives of grace, who tell stories of grace to a world that desperately needs it. Jesus says to Jairus' daughter, little girl, I say to you, get up. And week in and week out of your life, that same good news is yours. Have a great day. Blessings on your discussions. See you later.